The scratch at the door came 3 times before Maribel Crow decided it was real. She had been standing in the hallway, both hands at her sides, counting, which was what she always did when she heard something she could not immediately classify. 1, 2, 3. The hallway measured 11 paces from her bedroom door to the kitchen, 9 from the kitchen to the front entry. She knew this house the way a musician knows a piece of music she has played for 20 years, not by thinking, but by the body itself, by the distance between one breath and the next. She had lived in this house in Beaumont for 19 years. She had been blind for the last 4 of them, and she had managed the transition with the kind of thorough, methodical precision that left no room for pity, not other people's, and certainly not her own. The scratch came again, not frantic, not the pawing of something afraid. It was patient, deliberate. 3 even drags of something small and sharp against the painted wood, a pause, and then 3 more, as though whatever was outside understood that it might need to repeat itself. Maribel turned toward the door. The storm had been building since mid-morning. She could feel it in the air pressure, that low, peculiar weight that settled over the Gulf Coast in January when a front moved in off the water, and she had already adjusted for it. The patio chairs were folded against the wall. The loose board on the back step had been checked. Her medications were sorted into their Monday through Sunday organizer and placed in the correct drawer. Everything was in its place. Beaumont in January was not dramatic about cold, this was not the north, but it was serious about rain, and the sound of the water coming off the eaves told her the gutters were running full. The live oak in the front yard, the one that had been there longer than she had, was moving in a way she could hear from inside. Not bending, holding, the way live oaks hold. She had not been expecting company. She was not, as a rule, expecting much of anything anymore. That was not bitterness. It was not depression. It was simply the shape her life had taken, the way a path worn into grass takes the shape of the feet that use it. She had retired at 61 from 30 years as a medical transcriptionist. She had adapted to the vision loss with a competence that her doctor had described as remarkable and that she had privately dismissed as mere necessity. She had her grocery order delivered on Wednesdays. She had her books on audio, her radio for the morning news, her kitchen arranged so that the spices ran east to west from savory to sweet, and she had not missed an appointment in 14 months. She had a neighbor, a retired postal worker named Bud, who left her mail in the basket by the door on his way past, and she had Tamsin from the library who came on Tuesdays to help with correspondence and reading aloud, and she had decided long ago, quite enough. She had stopped expecting surprises. Surprises were, in her experience, problems she had not been given time to prepare for. The scratch came a 4th time. Maribel reached for the door handle. She was precise about this, as she was precise about everything. The handle was 9 inches from the left edge of the door frame at a height of 42 inches, and her hand found it the same way it always did, without searching. She turned it. She opened the door 3 inches and held it there, the way she always opened doors to unfamiliar sounds. The rain came in immediately. The cold edge of it, that particular Gulf Coast chill that was less about temperature and more about the damp that got in everywhere, into the collar, into the bones, into the small of the back. And underneath the rain, another smell. Wet fur. Something small pressed against the gap she had made in the door. Not pushing, not forcing, it's just leaning. The way something leans when it has been cold for a while and has found at last a source of warmth. Maribel stood very still. The animal did not make a sound. It did not perform. There was no meowing, no theatrical distress. There was only the pressure of a small, wet body against the door edge and the rain behind it and the live oak bending and holding in the dark front yard. She opened the door the rest of the way. The cat walked in. She felt it pass her ankle, the brush of wet fur against the side of her foot, and heard the soft percussion of 4 paws on her hardwood floor, measured and unhurried, moving from the entry into the hallway. She turned to follow the sound. It stopped. She waited. Then she felt it, a slight warmth against the outside of her left leg, just below the knee. Something pressing itself against her, not hard, not demanding, but with a steadiness that communicated without any ambiguity, a decision. The cat had found where it meant to be. Maribel stood in her hallway at 8:30 on a Thursday night in January, rain against her windows and an unknown wet animal leaning against her leg, and she did not know what to do with this, which was, she recognized with some irritation, a state she had not been in for a long time. "You are not staying," she said. The cat said nothing. "I mean that." The cat pressed, fractionally, closer, yes. She put a bowl of water down. That was all it was. There was no decision in it. A wet animal needed water, and she had water, and whatever other questions existed about the situation could wait until morning. She found the bowls on the second shelf of the lower cabinet, felt along the edge of the counter to the sink, filled it, set it on the floor near the refrigerator, and heard the cat drinking within 30 seconds of her placing it down. The cat had known where the sound of water would be. She found that slightly odd and filed it. She gave it a corner of the guest bathroom to sleep in, with a folded towel from the linen shelf that she had assessed by touch to be old enough not to mind, and she closed the door and went to bed and lay in the dark, which was her dark, the absolute dark she inhabited now. The same dark, whether eyes were open or closed, and listened to the storm work itself through. The rain, the live oak, the gutter running full. She had been fine before the scratch at the door. She would be fine now. She would call the Humane Society in the morning, and they would come and take it, and that would be that, and her house would be her house again. 11 paces, 9 paces, everything in its place. She slept. At some point in the night, she became aware that the guest bathroom door was open. She had not opened it. She heard the pause on the floor of the hallway, measured, unhurried, and then the soft compression of a body landing at the foot of her bed, at the precise left corner, and the turning, once, twice, and the settling. The sound of breathing that was not her own. She should have gotten up. She should have relocated the animal. Instead, she lay in the dark and listened to it breathe, and she did not feel as she had expected to feel, as she almost always felt when something disrupted the order of her house. She did not feel unsettled. She felt, and she would not have admitted this to anyone, very slightly less alone. That was more troubling. She named him Orvin, which was the name of no one she had ever known and no cat she had ever read about, which was the point. She did not want a name that carried any memory with it. She named him on the second morning, which was itself a decision she had not consciously made. She had simply called for him, and the word had come out, and he had answered to it without delay, which seemed to her less like learning and more like recognition. The name was not a commitment. She told herself this. She had told herself many things over the years that were partially true. The practical reality of having a cat in the house became apparent within the first week, and Maribel managed it the way she managed everything, by establishing the system first and attending to the feeling later. She ordered cat food on her Wednesday grocery delivery, adding it to the account with the same absence of ceremony with which she added soap or coffee. She found a litter box at the hardware store down the block. Bud had walked with her because she was not too proud to accept help when the situation was logistical rather than personal, and she set it in the corner of the second bathroom and oriented herself to its location by using the towel rack as a reference point. 12 inches south of the towel rack, 2 feet from the wall. She did not visit the vet. It was temporary. Orvin was, in those first days, a presence more than a character. A sound pattern, the soft impact of paws on hardwood, the subtle depression that appeared at the foot of her bed each night, the sound of his drinking in the morning from the bowl near the refrigerator. She mapped him the way she mapped everything, by accumulating small data, converting it into a reliable internal picture. He was medium-sized, based on the weight she felt when he jumped onto the bed. Not heavy, not slight. His fur, when she had put her hand down once and he had pressed his head into her palm without pulling away, was short and dense. His purr was low and persistent, not loud. It was the sound of an engine that ran with very little visible effort. She was not attached to him. He was a temporary arrangement until the rain stopped and the shelter opened and she sorted out the situation properly. The rain stopped and she did not call the shelter. She told herself she had simply been busy. She was not specifically busy. It was 10 days in when the first thing happened. She was walking from the bedroom to the kitchen at 6:45 in the morning, the way she walked it every morning. Out the bedroom door, left turn, 9 paces to the kitchen, right at the counter, 4 steps to the coffee maker. She had done this hundreds of times. The route was as familiar as her own breathing, and she moved through it without hesitation, the way a person moves through well-known space in the dark. Orvin was in the hallway. She knew, because she heard him ahead of her, the sound of him positioned between her and the kitchen, and she expected him to move, the way animals move when a person approaches. He did not move. She came to within a foot of him, and he was still there, directly in her path, and she could feel the specific density of his presence, the way air changes when a body occupies it. "Move," she said. He did not move. She stepped to the left to go around him. He shifted left. She stepped to the right. He shifted right. Maribel stood in the center of her hallway at 6:45 in the morning with a cat deliberately blocking her path, and she felt, briefly, specifically, and without much patience for it, the kind of annoyance that belongs only to extremely self-sufficient people who are being inconvenienced by something they cannot control. "Orvin," she said, "a warning." He sat down. She could hear it, the shift in his weight, the faint sound of him settling. He was not playing. He was not agitated. He was, she understood with a rising irritation, simply stopped. She considered the situation. She had been blind long enough to know that blind people do not stop in their own homes simply because something unexpected has occurred. The whole enterprise of living as she lived was built on not stopping. She was 64 years old. She had been moving through this house without sight for 4 years, and she had not once, fallen or injured herself or lost her orientation. Her system was sound. She took one more step forward. Her foot came down and found nothing. The kitchen chair was not where it was supposed to be. It was 18 inches east of its regular position, in the narrow gap between the counter end and the refrigerator, exactly where her next step would have landed, at the precise angle that would have caught the side of her foot and dropped her full into the counter edge. She stopped. Her heart was doing something she preferred not to acknowledge. She stood very still in the hallway and reached out her right hand and found the counter edge and held it and breathed once, twice. The chair was there. She could feel the edge of it with her toe now that she was looking, the wooden back of it wedged against the refrigerator. Someone had knocked it in the night, or she had moved it without remembering, or it had simply migrated the way things migrated in a house that was theoretically in order but was, after all, a house. She had not known it was there. Orvin had. She stood at the counter for a long moment. Behind her, she heard him stand up, shake himself lightly, the ear-flapping sound, and walk past her into the kitchen and drink from his bowl as though the whole thing had been a minor formality. Maribel put the chair back in its place. She made her coffee. She did not say anything. But the silence that followed was different from her usual silence. It was heavier. It had the quality of a thought she was not yet ready to examine directly. She mentioned none of this to Tamsin on Tuesday. Tamsin Hale was 26, a library assistant at the Beaumont Public Library, and she came on Tuesday afternoons with a tote bag of Maribel's requested audiobooks, a printout of anything Maribel needed read from her mail or her email, and a directness that Maribel had come to appreciate, without quite being willing to say so aloud. Tamsin was not sentimental about blindness. She had asked clear questions about what was and wasn't useful, and had then been useful in exactly those ways, which was rarer than it ought to be. She arrived at 2 o'clock, which was when she always arrived, and settled at the kitchen table, which was where they always worked, and she opened her bag without preamble and said, "You have a cat." "He's temporary," Maribel said. A pause. "He's sitting on your second chair. He does that." Another pause, and Maribel could hear in it the particular quality of Tamsin choosing not to say something. Then, "He's watching me. He watches everything." Tamsin set down her things. "What's his name?" "Orvin. That's a real name." "I'm aware." Orvin, for his part, had shifted to the edge of the chair. Maribel could track his movement by the small sounds, the creak of the wood, the adjustment of weight. She had not intended to become a person who tracked a cat by sound, and yet here she was. They worked through the mail, 3 bills, a letter from her niece in Houston, a notification from the county tax assessor's office. Tamsin read them without commentary, and Maribel directed her responses with the efficiency of a woman who had been managing paperwork for 4 decades and had no patience for delays. It was only at the end, when Tamsin was repacking the tote bag, that she said, without particular emphasis, "He moves before you do." Maribel was quiet. "I've been watching. When you get up from the table, he's already standing. When you go to the kitchen, he's already in position. I thought at first it was just attention, but it's more than that." "He is attentive," Maribel said. "He reacts before you do," Tamsin said. "That's different." Maribel did not respond to this. She heard Tamsin zip the tote bag. She heard Orvin shift on the chair, the slight compression of the seat cushion as he adjusted his weight. She had been hearing him do this for 10 days and had been understanding it one way. Now the understanding had shifted, very slightly, the way a picture shifts when you realize the foreground and the background have exchanged places. She did not say anything. But she thought about the chair in the morning, with its 18-inch migration, and Orvin standing in the hallway where a cat should not have needed to stand. "He reacts before things happen," Tamsin had said. "Not before Maribel. Before things." She thought about this for a long time after Tamsin left. The first real test came 3 weeks in, on a Saturday morning, when the sky over Beaumont was the flat, colorless gray of a second round of rain coming in off the coast, and the live oak was already starting to move with a different quality. Not the holding of the first storm, but the low, considered sway of one that had time on its hands. Maribel had been planning to go out to the small vegetable garden she kept on the south side of the yard, 2 raised beds with winter spinach and a row of green onions that she tended by hand, by touch, which was a thing she had allowed herself to keep even after the vision loss, because the garden was hers and she knew every inch of it. She had been tending it this way for 3 years, and she had not once lost her footing on the stepping stones between the beds, and there was no reason, she told herself, to behave as though she could not manage. She put on her jacket. She picked up her cane. She used it primarily in unfamiliar spaces, but she had it, and she walked to the back door. Orvin was there. He had been in the kitchen a moment ago. She had heard him finish at his bowl. Now he was at the back door, which she knew because her hand hit the top of his head when she reached for the handle. "Move," she said. He did not move. She sighed. She reached around him for the handle. He shifted his body so that he was between her hand and the door. Not aggressive, not frantic, just present with the implacable solidity of something that had decided. "I go out here 3 times a week," she told him. He put his head against the back of her hand. She stood at the back door with a cat leaning into her fingers and the smell of incoming rain coming through the weather stripping, and she felt, with a clarity that was inconvenient, that this was a negotiation she did not know how to win. She tried the handle one more time. He leaned harder. "All right," she said. It was not surrender. It was a delay. There was a difference. She went back to the kitchen and sat down, and she had not been there 3 minutes when she heard it. A sharp, sustained creak from the south side of the yard, wood under stress, and then a longer splitting sound, and then the heavy percussion of something large landing on the ground. The fence section. The section of cedar fence that ran along the garden beds had been repaired the previous spring with a section of newer wood that had never quite seated properly against the old post. She had known this. She had meant to call the fence company. She had thought she had more time. The stepping stones between the beds ran directly alongside that fence. If she had been outside, she would have been there. Maribel sat at her kitchen table and did not move for a moment. Then she turned toward where she knew Orvin was. She could hear him, 2 feet to her left, sitting on the floor, and she said nothing because there was nothing to say that would adequately address what she was beginning to understand. He did not come to comfort her. He did not press himself against her leg the way he did sometimes. He simply stayed at his 2 feet, present without performing. That night, she opened the Humane Society's website on her phone and then closed it without doing anything. She was not ready to name what that meant either. Were the small complications of keeping a cat proved in practice to be exactly the size they appeared. The food was not expensive, but it was a category. The litter was manageable. The veterinary question loomed larger than the others because Maribel did not currently have a veterinarian for a cat, which meant she needed to find one, which meant she needed someone to drive her, which meant she needed to ask someone for help. And this, specifically, was the category of activity that Maribel found most difficult. It was not that she was too proud. She was clear-eyed enough to know that pride in the ordinary sense was not her problem. The problem was different. It was structural. Over the years of adaptation, she had built her life to require as little external help as possible, not because she disliked people, but because need was unpredictable, and she had learned that predictability was what kept the whole architecture standing. Every time she added a dependency, a person, a service, a routine that required someone else to cooperate, she added a point of potential failure. She was not fragile. She was precise. And precision, in her experience, was best achieved alone. Having a cat was already a complication in this system. Needing a vet was a complication of the complication. She mentioned this to Tamsin on a Tuesday, which surprised her. She had not planned to mention it, and Tamsin, without being asked, said, "My uncle has a car. He's retired. He'd be glad to take you." "I don't know your uncle." "He's good company." "That isn't relevant." "He's very quiet," Tamsin said, which was more relevant, and she probably knew it. The uncle's name was Carl. He arrived at 9 on a Thursday morning in his well-maintained sedan and confirmed himself to be, as advertised, quiet. He helped Maribel with the carrier. Orvin had gone into it with the resigned composure of an animal that understood carriers as a category of necessity, and he drove without conversation and found the clinic without incident and waited in the parking lot reading something on his phone, and the whole business was accomplished in under 2 hours, which was within Maribel's tolerance. What came out of the clinic visit was not what she had expected. The vet, a calm woman named Dr. Selina Marsh, had examined Orvin thoroughly and reported him to be in excellent health for an adult male cat, approximately 4 to 6 years old, with no signs of malnutrition or injury. She ran the routine scan for a microchip as standard procedure. She found one, old. No active registration. The chip number came back linked to a service that had not maintained records past a certain point, which happened with older chips, and the registration had lapsed. It was not conclusive. It meant someone had owned this cat at some point and had taken it to a vet and had cared for it enough to have it chipped, and then, for whatever reason, without malice or even intention, that record had dissolved. Dr. Marsh said all of this clearly and without drama. She said there was no legal obligation to pursue the original owner, that the registration had lapsed, that the cat appeared to have been on his own for some time before arriving at Maribel's door. Maribel asked her to repeat the relevant parts twice. She asked the right questions. She collected the relevant information. She said thank you and meant it, and she and Carl drove home with Orvin in the carrier on the back seat, and Maribel sat in the front and did not speak, and Carl was, as promised, very quiet. That night was the hardest night since the first one. She had been through loss before, the vision, the work she had built her identity around, the specific grief of adapting to a life that was smaller in some ways than the one she had planned. She had learned to move through these things. She had learned that sitting with a hard feeling was not the same as being destroyed by it, and she had, over time, gotten fairly competent at both the sitting and the moving. But this was different. This was not a loss she had. This was a loss she was contemplating making in advance, on purpose, to protect herself from a loss she had not yet experienced and might never experience, which was, she understood with some clarity, exactly the kind of thing she had been doing for years. Orvin had been someone else's, that someone else might still exist, somewhere, unchipped and unregistered and not looking for him. Or they might never have looked, or they might be gone. She did not know. What she did know, and the knowing had the weight of something she had been carrying without fully feeling, was that over the last 3 weeks, the house had changed. Not in any way she could point to on a floor plan. The 11 paces and the 9 paces were the same. The spices ran east to west. Everything was in its place. But the quality of the silence was different. It was not simply the absence of sound. It had a texture now, the low purr from the foot of the bed at night, the sound of water in the bowl in the morning, the soft impact of paws that had begun, she realized, to function as a kind of second navigation system, a set of sounds that told her where things were and what was coming. She did not call him that night. She sat in the living room, and she did not speak, and after an hour she heard him at the bedroom door, not inside, not at his usual spot at the foot of the bed. At the door. She went to bed without inviting him in. She lay in her absolute dark and listened. After a while, she heard him settle, not at the door, not on the bed, on the floor, just outside the bedroom, a few feet into the hall, as though he understood something about distance, as though he was waiting to be asked. She had not made a decision by morning. She told herself this through the morning coffee and the morning radio and the morning routine, each piece of which performed itself with its usual reliability. The coffee maker on the third shelf from the right, the radio on the kitchen window ledge at the 6 o'clock position, the bread on the second rack of the bread box. Everything known, everything dependable. She told herself she had not decided. But at 8:15, without quite intending to, she walked to the bedroom doorway and stood there, and she said his name. Orvin came in from the hall immediately, as though he had been waiting within easy range. She heard him cross the floor. She felt him press against the side of her leg. She put her hand down. He pressed his head into her palm. She stood in the bedroom doorway with her hand on her cat's head, and she understood, without wanting to, that the decision had been made some time ago by a part of her that had been paying attention in the moments when she was too busy being careful to notice. She was not going to call the shelter. She was not going to search for an original owner whose record had dissolved. She was going to keep this cat, and keeping him meant, and this was the part that had the weight to it, that she was choosing to need something again, that she was choosing to have something that mattered enough to lose. She had not done that in a long time. She was not entirely sure she still knew how. But Orvin was pressing into her hand with the absolute conviction of an animal that had made its own decision weeks ago, and she thought, standing in the doorway, that this was not the worst company in the world for figuring it out. The weeks that followed were a negotiation between the life she had built and the life that was being built alongside it, quietly and without her full cooperation, by a 4 to 6-year-old cat with an expired microchip and a talent for standing in inconvenient places. She adjusted the grocery order. She found a routine for the litter box that she could manage without external help. She started keeping Orvin's food on the second shelf rather than the floor, which had required rearranging 2 other things, but which she had done without complaining to herself about it, which was, she noted, progress of a kind. The vet visits became a quarterly calendar entry. Carl drove her. The sessions in the car were still quiet. By the third trip, he had started bringing 2 cups of coffee from the drive-through, which he passed to her without comment, and which she accepted without comment, and which was, she thought, a reasonable way to maintain the arrangement. She had not asked for help in any significant way in 4 years. She was apparently asking now. She noticed this. She did not make a great deal of it, but she noticed it. The thing that she noticed most in those weeks was the pattern that Tamsin had named first. Orvin's behavior before things happened. It was not consistent enough to be explained away as coincidence, but irregular enough not to constitute a rule, and the irregularity made it in some ways more difficult to dismiss. He did not block every path she took. He did not stop her from every ordinary movement. He was not, and this was what she came back to late in the evenings when the radio had gone quiet and the house was settling, he was not performing protection. He was doing something else, something she did not have a precise word for. He was paying attention to the specific shape of her world and to the places where it was vulnerable, and he had the patience to wait for those moments and act in them with a precision that was, and she admitted this only to herself, alone, in the absolute dark at the foot of her bed. More than she had expected from anything that had scratched 3 times at her door in the rain. The morning of the third practical conflict was in February, a Tuesday, and Maribel had woken with a low-grade headache that she had decided to handle with coffee and aspirin, and a refusal to acknowledge it as significant. She dressed. She went to the kitchen. Orvin was restless. This was something she had not seen before, exactly. He was not anxious in any way she would have classified as alarming. He was not vocalizing or running, but he was in motion in a way that had a quality to it, moving from the kitchen to the hallway and back, returning to her leg and then leaving it. The particular pattern of displacement that a thing makes when it cannot be still and also cannot find what it is looking for. She was in the hallway when the smell came. Faint, almost not there, but present and specific and wrong. The particular acrid signature of something hot in a place where nothing should be hot. She stopped walking. She turned her head, tried to get the direction of it. Orvin walked to the kitchen, stopped, came back to her. She followed him. The stove. She had turned on the front burner that morning for the kettle. She always used the kettle, not the coffee maker, on mornings when she had a headache because the ritual helped. And she had moved to the bread box, and the headache had been doing what headaches do. And she had not gone back to check. The kettle had run dry. It was not on fire. It was not, precisely, a crisis, but it was the kind of thing that, over time, without intervention, could become one. She turned off the burner and moved the kettle to the back of the stove and stood at the counter and felt the heat of the element, even from 4 inches away. She had been in the hallway. She had been going back to her room. She put her hand flat on the counter, not on the element, and breathed. Behind her, she heard Orvin sit down. She stood at the stove for a long time without speaking. The headache was still there. Outside, a cardinal was doing something emphatic in the live oak. The Gulf Coast morning was doing what it did, getting incrementally warmer and brighter, with the slow, impersonal confidence of a thing that had been doing this for a very long time. She thought about the chair in the hallway, the first morning, the fence with its long, splitting sound, and now this, 3 times. She was not superstitious. She was not given to attributing intention to animals beyond what the evidence supported. She was a woman who had transcribed medical reports for 30 years and who understood that the accurate description of a thing was the beginning of managing it. Here was the accurate description. Orvin had, on 3 distinct occasions, positioned himself between Maribel and a thing that could hurt her. Not always dramatically, not always at the last possible moment. Early enough each time that the thing was still avoidable. She was not sure what to do with this description. She was fairly sure that what she had been doing, treating him as a temporary arrangement, as a practical necessity, as something apart from the central structure of her life, was no longer an accurate description of the situation. The situation had changed. She had not quite changed with it yet, but she was standing at her stove in her kitchen in February with her hand on the counter and her cat sitting behind her, and for the first time in longer than she wanted to count, she had the distinct and uncomfortable feeling that she did not have a complete and working model of what was happening in her own house. That feeling was frightening. It was also, and she recognized this with some surprise, not entirely unwelcome. Tamsin arrived at 2 o'clock that same Tuesday, and Maribel said nothing about the stove. She said nothing about Orvin's restlessness that morning, or about the 3 incidents, or about the adjustment she had been making, without quite admitting to it, in how she moved through her own house. She read her mail. She answered her correspondence. She asked Tamsin to look up the contact information for the fence company. Tamsin did all of these things. Then she said, in the same tone she used for everything, "He's been watching the window for 20 minutes. Maribel turned toward the window. She heard nothing specific. "Which window?" "The front. Left side. He's sitting on the windowsill and he's looking at the street, but his ears are back, not forward." Maribel thought about what she knew of Orvin's ear positions. She had been learning them by sound, the difference in the spatial quality of his alertness when his ears were forward versus the slightly softer silence when they were not. "Something coming?" she asked. "Doesn't look like anything," Tamsin said. "But he's been there since I sat down." They waited. 20 minutes later, the neighbor on the east side, a man named Darrell, she had never had occasion to speak to, knocked on her door to tell her that the city was shutting off water to their block for 2 hours for emergency pipe repair. He had come to warn the people on either side so they could fill containers first. Maribel thanked him. She closed the door. She stood in the entry for a moment. Then she walked to the kitchen and filled every pot and pitcher she owned, methodically and without hurry, and set them on the counter in order by size. She heard Orvin drop down from the windowsill and pad to his water bowl. "I know," she said to no one in particular, and this time she let herself mean it, "Monsieur." It was Tamsin who asked one afternoon in late February whether Maribel had ever considered applying for a formal guide animal assessment. Maribel was quiet for long enough that Tamsin added carefully, "Not because you need one. You clearly manage. I only meant that what Orvin does, it's unusual. Most cats don't behave like that. I'm aware. There are organizations that study it. Animal-assisted awareness. There's a woman at the university in Beaumont, Dr. Fawcett, who documents this kind of Tamsin. Yes. I am not putting my cat in a study. A pause. Then, Tamsin said, with the composure of a 26-year-old who had learned to pick her moments, fair enough. Maribel was at the kitchen table with her hands flat on the surface, which was what she did when she was holding a boundary. She was aware of this. She was also aware that the boundary she was holding was, on some level, not about the study. It was about the word. Her cat. She had said it without thinking. She had meant it without thinking. That was the thing about decisions that had already been made by a quieter part of you. They surfaced like that, in language, before your considered mind caught up. She did not revisit the subject. But later that evening, she sat in the living room with the radio playing something low and old, a station out of Houston that played standards on Tuesday nights, music she had not listened to in years without quite knowing why she had stopped. And Orvin was at the foot of the couch, not on it, in his position that she had come to understand as companionable without being demanding. Close enough to be present, not close enough to require anything. She had stopped listening to the Tuesday standards sometime around the year she had begun losing her sight. She had not decided to stop. It had simply not seemed worth the effort of turning the radio to the right station when there was so much else to manage. She was listening now. Orvin shifted once, adjusting his position on the floor, and was still again. The song on the radio was one she recognized from a very long time ago. She did not name it, even to herself. She simply let it be in the room. Tapengso. March arrived with the Gulf Coast's particular version of winter releasing its hold, not dramatically, not all at once, but in stages, the way things relent when they are ready. The mornings were still cool enough for a jacket. The afternoons were not. The live oak in the front yard had the particular stillness of a tree between seasons, holding what it had, not yet committed to what came next. Maribel had two routines she had not resumed since losing her vision. The vegetable garden, which she had resumed with difficulty and maintained with effort, and her late afternoon walk on the block. She had stopped the walk not because she was physically incapable of it, she was not, but because the sidewalk on her block had two uneven sections that she could not reliably predict, and she had fallen once, early in the adaptation period, and the falling had done something to her confidence in a way that had not fully healed. She had simply stopped walking. That was the honest account. On a Thursday afternoon in early March, she put on her jacket and her shoes, and she stood at the front door with her cane in her right hand. Orvin was beside her. She had not called him. He had simply appeared, the way he appeared when she was at a threshold, not blocking this time, not insisting, just present. The particular quality of his presence that she had come to recognize as different from his ordinary proximity. Denser, more deliberate. She opened the door. The afternoon came in, the smell of cut grass from somewhere down the block, the warmth that had been building since noon, the distant sound of children at the school 3 streets east, the sound of a mockingbird in the live oak making its several voices. She stepped outside. Orvin stepped with her. He stayed at her left side, approximately at her knee, as she came down the porch steps. 3 steps, she knew. She had counted them 10,000 times. He did not touch her. He was simply there, at the exact position where she would feel him if she drifted, where his presence was a reference point rather than a constraint. She walked to the end of the front walk. She turned left on the sidewalk. She walked 1 block. The first uneven section was where she remembered it, a lifted edge from a tree root, the kind of lip that catches a cane tip if you're not precise. She was precise. She cleared it. The second section was further along. She slowed. She felt with her cane. The uneven panel was there, and she navigated it, and she came out on the far side and kept walking. She walked 2 full blocks and turned and came back. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes. She came up her porch steps and went inside and stood in her hallway, and she was fine. She was completely fine. She had been completely capable of this walk for 4 years and had simply not done it because something in her, some accumulated fear, had quietly convinced her that the risk outweighed the return. Orvin walked past her to his bowl. Maribel stood in her hallway and felt something loosen in her chest that had been there for a long time without her knowing the name for it. Not grief, not the loss of sight. She had grieved that in full and moved through it. Something smaller and more recent. The gradual, quiet surrender of things she had once done simply because she could. She had stopped expecting the walk. She had stopped expecting the standards on the radio. She had stopped expecting, without a particular decision, quite a few small things that had made her life feel like hers. She was standing in her hallway noticing this. Orvin finished his water and shook his ears. She went to put the radio on. The microchip had not dissolved entirely from her thinking. It surfaced occasionally, the way unresolved questions surface, not with urgency, but with the low, persistent presence of something that has not yet been answered to its own satisfaction. She had looked up the registry service 3 times and had done nothing with the information. The registration was genuinely lapsed. Dr. Marsh had been clear. There was no legal obligation, no moral requirement that she could construct from the available facts. Orvin had been, for all practical purposes, alone before he had found her door. And yet, the question was not about ownership. She understood that. The question was about the other life, the earlier one, the one that had purchased the chip and taken him to a vet, and then, for reasons she would never know, had allowed the record to dissolve. That life had been real. That cat had been loved, and she, Maribel Crowe, was now living with the residue of it without knowing anything about it, which was a form of mystery she could not entirely close. She had made peace with not closing it. That was the best she could do. She had made peace also with the fact that Orvin was hers now in every way that mattered. The food was hers. The bowl was hers. The routine of the vet and the grocery order and the quarterly trips in Carl's sedan were all hers. And the foot of her bed every night was his. It was Tamsin who noticed the change in Orvin's behavior before the second big storm. She arrived on a Tuesday in mid-March to find him already in the state that Maribel had come to recognize as heightened, not the ordinary attentiveness, which was constant, but the specific quality of unease that had preceded the stove incident, the fence, the water shutoff, the ears oriented separately, the movement with no terminus. "He's doing it again," Tamsin said, setting her bag down. "I know," Maribel said. "What do you think it is this time?" "I don't speculate before the event," Maribel said, which was both true and not entirely true. "I simply note the behavior and adjust accordingly." Tamsin was quiet. Then, "What does adjusting accordingly look like exactly?" Maribel considered. "It means I pay closer attention to the things I might be inclined to overlook." She was in the process of exactly this when she went to the back of the house to retrieve her reading tablet from its charging spot and walked past the small laundry room. The smell was there before the sound. Water. Not the smell of ordinary water in a tub or a sink. Something colder. Something that had volume and proximity and the distinct mineral quality of water that was where it should not be. She stopped in the laundry room doorway. "Tamsin," she said. Tamsin came immediately. She heard the even tread of her footsteps in the hall. "What?" And then, "Oh, Maribel, there's water coming from under the washing machine." Maribel stood very still and listened to it. The sound of water on concrete, not dripping, moving. The slow, spreading sound of accumulation. "The supply line," she said. "Left side at the back. Is it the fitting or the line itself?" A pause. The sound of Tamsin moving carefully into the room. "I can see a split in the line, about 6 inches from the wall. The water shutoff is behind the machine right side. There is a wrench on the second hook of the utility board, which is on the east wall. I see it." The sound of the wrench, the sound of Tamsin moving around the machine, and then the water slowing and slowing and stopping. Silence. "Got it," Tamsin said. Maribel let out a breath. "That would have been significant," Tamsin said, from behind the washing machine. "How long has that line been showing where?" "I don't know," Maribel said. "I can't see it." She had not meant that as anything other than a factual statement, but in the stillness of the laundry room with the water stopped and the smell of wet concrete around them, it had a weight to it she had not intended. "I know," Tamsin said, simply and without pity. "I'll call the plumber." "I can call the plumber." "I'll call the plumber while you change your shoes," Tamsin said, "because the left one has water on it." Maribel looked down, instinctively, which she still did sometimes, and felt the cold damp at the toe of her left shoe, and she said, "Fine." Orvin had followed them both to the laundry room. She heard him in the doorway behind her, not coming in, not retreating. The particular quality of his presence that meant he had done what he came to do, and was now simply present. She turned toward him. She could not see him, of course. She never could, but she had built, over these months, a detailed interior picture of him. The medium body, the short, dense fur, the ears that read the world so precisely, the dark eyes that she knew from the way others described them but would never see for herself. He existed in her world as weight, as warmth, as sound, as the specific pressure of a head against her palm. She knew him. She put her hand down. He came forward and put his head into it. The plumber came the following morning. He confirmed the supply line and replaced it in under an hour and gave Maribel a clear account of what had failed and why, which she appreciated. He also told her, while packing his tools, that the line had been showing wear for a while, that if it had gone during the night, during a storm, with no one to respond quickly, the water could have spread to the subfloor. Maribel thanked him. She walked him to the door. She stood in the entry after he left and thought about water on a subfloor, in the dark, in a storm, with no one to show her where it was. She thought about Orvin in the laundry room doorway. She thought about the fence, the chair, the stove, the water shut-off. She thought about 3 months ago, when she had opened a door 3 inches in the rain, and a wet cat had leaned into the gap without dramatics, without performance, with the simple purposefulness of something that knew where it needed to be. She thought about all of the things she had not been expecting. Today, there was a final storm that March, the last serious one of the season, which came in off the Gulf on a Thursday night with the full commitment of a weather system that had nothing yet to lose. Rain in horizontal sheets. The live oak doing the thing it did that was not bending. The gutters at capacity. The kind of storm that Beaumont residents knew by feel, not rare, not surprising, just the Gulf Coast, reminding you periodically that it was still there and still meant business. Maribel had prepared, as she always prepared, the patio chairs folded, the windows checked, the flashlight batteries confirmed by touch. She was not afraid of storms. She found them, if she was honest, slightly clarifying. The way extreme weather clarified things, stripped out the optional, made it obvious which things were load-bearing. She was in the kitchen when Orvin started. Not restless this time, something more directed. He crossed the kitchen, came to her leg, moved away, came back. His movement had a quality she had not heard before, a tightness to it, the sound of an animal that needed her to understand something quickly and was not sure she was understanding it. She turned off the kitchen radio. She listened. Orvin crossed the kitchen a second time, and this time he did not stop at her leg. He kept moving. She heard his pause, the measured, deliberate sound of them, going toward the hallway, and then he came back, and he was at her leg again. Going toward the hallway, coming back, going toward the hallway. "All right," she said. She followed him. He moved at a pace she could match, which she had noticed before. He did not run ahead, did not lag. He maintained the distance that kept her in acoustic range of him, and she followed the sound through the kitchen, into the hallway, past the bathroom, and left toward the back of the house. Toward the laundry room. She stopped at the door. There was no smell of water this time. The plumber had been here. The line was replaced. She stood in the doorway and listened, and then she heard it. Not from the laundry room. From the utility room behind it, the small, narrow space that housed the water heater and the main supply panel, and a shelf of cleaning supplies that she never quite reached the back of. The sound was low and constant and had the particular quality of water under pressure finding a new way out. Not a split line this time. Not a slow leak, a pipe, a seam, something that had been holding and was not holding now. She crossed to the utility room door and opened it and heard the sound immediately change, louder, fuller, the unmistakable texture of water on concrete and on the wall and spreading. She stepped back. She thought very quickly and very clearly. The main shut off. It was at the street. She had never used it. She would need to go outside in this storm, find the box at the curb, open it with the key that was in the utility drawer. The storm outside was not interested in her schedule. She went to the utility drawer, Her hands found it. Second drawer left of the sink. The key hung on the small hook at the back right corner, which she had placed there when she first moved in and had not had reason to touch since. She took the key. She put on her rain jacket. She found her shoes. Orvin was at the back door. She stopped. He did not move from the door this time. He was not blocking her. He was at the door, which was exactly where she needed to go. She stood there for a moment in the dark hallway with the rain against the windows and the sound of water spreading behind her, and she understood that what she needed right now was not to argue with the situation. She needed to call someone. This was not a defeat. It was the correct assessment of a practical problem. She had a phone. She had Tamsin's number. She had Carl's number. She had, she realized, more numbers than she had possessed 3 months ago, which was a fact she had not quite tallied until this moment. She called Tamsin. Tamsin answered on the second ring. It was 10:40 at night. "The main supply line in my utility room," Maribel said. "I need someone to shut off the main at the street. It's raining heavily." "I'll call my uncle. I have the key." 15 minutes, Tamsin said, and was gone. Maribel stood in her kitchen and managed the interval the way she managed everything, by doing what could be done. She moved the items from the bottom cabinet of the utility room that she could reach. She could hear the water. She could orient herself to it. She knew where the low shelf was. She moved the cleaning supplies she could reach to the kitchen counter. She rolled the small bath mat from the hallway against the door gap to slow the spread. She could not stop the water. She could slow its reach. She was still doing this when she heard the knock at the back door. Carl. She opened it. The rain was enormous in the opening, the live oak behind him a sound more than a shape. He was already wet through his jacket. "Key?" he said. She put it in his hand. 2 minutes, he said, and was gone. She stood at the back door and listened to the storm. The rain on the roof, the gutters, the live oak doing its patient holding. The sound of water behind her, still moving but not gaining. She had done what she could with the mat and the towels she had pulled from the hallway linen shelf. And Orvin, at her side, not at her leg this time, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, the specific warmth of a small body near a larger one, the kind of warmth that was not extraordinary and meant everything. She stood in her own back doorway in the middle of a Gulf Coast storm with her cat beside her, and she did not feel, as she had expected to feel, the particular loneliness of being blind in a crisis. She felt held, not by anyone in particular, not by Orvin alone, though he was there, by the network of small choices, the phone numbers, the quarterly vet trips, Carl with his quiet sedan and his 2 cups of coffee, Tamsin who answered on the second ring at 10:40 at night, that she had assembled piece by piece, without quite admitting to herself that she was assembling anything. She had been building something. She had been calling it managing. It was not only managing. The water stopped. The change in sound was complete and immediate. The silence where the pressure had been, the remaining water settling from movement into stillness, the utility room going quiet in the way rooms go quiet after something has been resolved. Carl was at the back door 2 minutes later, soaked through, with his hand out for a towel, which she had already pulled from the shelf. "Main's off," he said. "Plumber in the morning." "Thank you," she said. He dried his hands. He did not leave. "Coffee?" she said. "I wouldn't mind," he said. She made it. They sat at her kitchen table, she and Carl and the storm outside, and Orvin somewhere near the refrigerator, in his position that she understood now as available without insisting. The coffee was hot. The rain on the windows was the sound of a system working itself out. She had not sat at this table with another person, just sitting, not working, not conducting business, in a long time. She was sitting now. Carl said after a while, "He all right?" "He's fine." "Good cat." She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the scratching at the door 3 months ago, 3 even drags on the wood. She thought about a wet animal walking past her ankle into a house that had not been expecting it. She thought about hallways and kitchens and back doors and all the places where a small, precise body had been standing ahead of her when she needed it. "Yes," she said, "he is." The plumber came Friday morning and replaced the failed fitting and confirmed what Carl had seen and gave his report with the same calm competence as the one before, which Maribel appreciated in the professional way she appreciated all competence. The utility room floor dried over the weekend. There was no subfloor damage. The crisis, in retrospect, was the size it had been: significant, managed, resolved. Tamsin came on Tuesday. She did not say "I told you so" about anything. She read the mail and helped with correspondence, and at the end she said simply, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Maribel said. "Different fine or usual fine?" Maribel considered. Outside, the live oak was doing nothing particular. The morning was warm, which meant it was beginning to be April. The cardinal was back in the oak. She could hear it from the kitchen window, the same emphatic note it had been making all winter, though it sounded different now that the air was softer. "Different," she said. Tamsin nodded. She could hear it in the quality of the pause that followed, the satisfaction of someone whose careful attention had been worth something. "He was at the utility room before I knew," Maribel said. "Before there was anything to smell or hear." "I know," Tamsin said. "I don't have an explanation for that." "You don't need one." Maribel considered this. She had spent a great deal of her life needing explanations for things. The structure of explanations, cause, effect, conclusion, had been the architecture of her professional life, and it had served her well, and she was not going to pretend that she had set it aside without effort. But some things she had been learning arrived with their own sufficiency. Some things did not need to be explained to be used, to be trusted, to be, in whatever imprecise and unscientific and entirely human sense, accepted. "He needs a checkup," she said, which was not a change of subject, but was the most concrete way she had of saying what she meant. "I'll call Dr. Marsh this week." "I'll let Carl know," Tamsin said. April in Beaumont had its own particular smell, something to do with the river and the warming ground and the white flowers of the magnolias along the east blocks, a smell that was full and layered and not quite sweet. Maribel had grown up with it. It was the smell of the world reopening after the grey months, and she had loved it as a child and then forgotten to love it for a while, somewhere in the busy middle years, and had then loved it again later, and had not realized until recently that she had been loving it all along in the specific wordless way that people love the things they have always known. She walked every afternoon now. The route had expanded, 3 blocks, then 4, then a longer loop that took her past the farmer's market on the corner of Calder Avenue, where the vendor who sold honey greeted her by name and always had a sample open, and past the small library branch on the next block, where Tamsin's colleague held the door when she saw Maribel coming, and past the old bakery whose exhaust vent put warm air and the smell of cinnamon directly onto the sidewalk at the right time of afternoon. She knew this neighborhood now in the way she had not known it 3 months ago. She knew it by sound and by smell and by the specific texture of the pavement under her cane, and she knew it because she had been walking it every afternoon with a medium-sized cat at her left knee. Orvin walked with her. He had walked with her the first time and the second, and she had waited to see whether it was a behavior he would sustain. He had sustained it. He maintained his position at her knee, not touching her, not running ahead, not investigating the interesting smells on every front walk, or rather, he investigated them briefly and then returned to position with the matter-of-fact promptness of someone who had other responsibilities. The neighbors had noticed. The woman 2 houses down had said, the first time she saw them, "Is that your cat?" "Yes," Maribel had said. "He walks with you." "He does." The woman had been quiet for a moment, the way people are quiet when they see something they do not quite have a category for. Then she had said, "That's something." "It is," Maribel agreed. She did not offer an explanation. She had found she did not need to. Orvin walked at her knee, and she walked the block, and the neighborhood made its noises around them, and the live oak was behind them, and the magnolias were somewhere ahead, and that was sufficient. There was an afternoon in April when she sat on the front porch, which she had not done much of since she had stopped being able to see the street. The porch had felt, in those early years of adaptation, like a display, a place where you sat to be seen, to see, and the absence of one half of that exchange had made the whole thing feel unbalanced. She had retreated to the kitchen, to the interior, to the rooms that needed no audience. She sat on the porch now. It was a warm afternoon. The live oak moved above her. The cardinal was in it. A dog was being walked by someone whose footsteps she recognized, the specific rhythm of the woman who walked the golden retriever, because the dog's nails had a particular sound on the sidewalk. A car went past slowly, the way cars go past when the driver is looking for a house number. She sat with her hands in her lap, and she did not do anything useful. This was still, she acknowledged, not entirely comfortable. She had spent 64 years being useful, and the discipline of simply being in a place without a task had not come easily. But she was practicing. Orvin was beside her on the porch chair, not on the arm, not in her lap, beside her, in his own position, the way he occupied most spaces, present, unhurried, with the quality of a creature that had nowhere else it needed to be. She heard a child on a bicycle go past. She heard the magnolias, which she could not see, but which she had learned to smell at a distance, that heavy sweetness that arrived before the tree. She heard two people talking on the other side of the street, an ordinary conversation about something ordinary, and the sound of it was good in the way that ordinary sounds are good when you have been listening for them. She thought about 3 months ago. The rain, the hallway, the precise scratch of claws on a painted door. She thought about everything she had not been expecting. She had been, for a long time, a woman who treated the absence of surprise as a form of competence. If nothing caught you off guard, you were managing. If your system held, you were safe. She had understood this as self-sufficiency, as the correct response to a life that had taken things from her that she had not prepared to lose. She understood it differently now. Not as a critique. She would not undo the years of careful management. They had kept her in this house, in this life, with her independence intact, and she was not inclined to romanticize the alternative. But there was a version of safety that became, after a while, indistinguishable from surrender. A version of not needing anyone that was not strength, but absence. The removal of everything that could hurt you by the removal of everything that could matter. She had been, she thought, somewhere in that territory. She was not anymore. She was on a porch in April with a cat beside her and 4 phone numbers in her contacts that had not been there in January, and the walk that she had not taken for 4 years was now a daily event, and the radio played standards on Tuesday nights, and she was, for the first time in a long time, available to be surprised. She had not decided any of this. She had simply followed a sound through a house until it led her somewhere she had not planned to go. Orvin stood up on the chair beside her, turned twice in the unhurried way he had, and stepped into her lap. He had not done this before. She held very still. He turned once more and settled, the full weight of him, unhurried and solid, with his chin on his front paws, facing the street. She put her hand on his back. He breathed. She breathed. The live oak moved above the porch. The cardinal said its emphatic thing. Down the block, the woman with the golden retriever was coming back, the dog's nails making their particular rhythm on the warm April sidewalk. Orvin's tail moved once, slow, complete. Then it was still. The magnolias would not last more than 2 more weeks. They never did. They opened extravagantly and then let go, the petals coming down in the first real wind, creamy and enormous on the sidewalk, and then the trees went back to being simply trees, holding their dark leaves all through the long Gulf Coast summer. Maribel would walk past them every afternoon. She would smell them before she reached them. And at her left knee, at his position, Orvin would walk with her, past the honey vendor, past the library branch, past the bakery with its cinnamon exhaust, through the warm and ordinary and entirely sufficient neighborhood that had always been hers, and that was a little more hers now than it had been in January. The cardinal went on. The live oak held. Orvin's chin rested on his front paws, and his tail lay loose over Maribel's knee, and he watched the street with the patient, precise attention that had been his from the beginning. He was not watching for anything in particular. There was nothing to watch for. Everything was already here,